don't recall what class this is, maybe class 27 or class 28 of the Golden Doves. We're in the introduction in page Roman numeral 22, second paragraph. As a poet, and I'll read first and then I'll have you read. And this is a perennial problem of writing. God must hide his omnipresence. So we look at the creations of God as God's writings, and these writings are beautiful. The creations are beautiful and magnificent. So we also view it as God's poetry, right? So there is a problem when a poet writes a poem or when an author writes a book, and that is God must hide his omnipresence. I discussed this in the previous class, how God must hide his omnipresence, otherwise there would be no book. But every writer has to hide his omnipresence.
Mm-hmm.
The poet is each one of the people of his fictitious world, says Borges. He is every breath and every detail. One of his tasks, certainly not the easiest, is to hide or dissimulate that omnipresence. So it's like there's two things that are sotrim. A good writer has to be in control over what happens in a story, and every detail matters, and every detail reflects the good writer as he is. But on the other hand, the good writer can allow himself to be seen. So that's kind of like the great paradox of the world, is that there is Hashgacha Pirati. Hashem is mashkiach on the world, and Hashem is controlling what happens in the world, at least other than Bechira Chofshit. Everything in the world is controlled and planned and organized, and yet Hashem can't show himself. So that's a great, and that's why the scientists all say, there is no need for God to explain the world. They're right, there is no need for God to explain the world. That's exactly the way any good writer designs his literary creation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But
yeah, go ahead.
But he still leaves certain traces, clues, all kinds of things like that. I would say that's part of his dissemination, because a good author knows how to disseminate himself just enough so that if somebody looks hard enough, they'll be able to find him for the sake of the author. No?
Yes, but don't forget the pasuk in Tehillim, Bayam darkecha uvmayim rabim.
Right, I remember the one.
But then the pasuk ends. Ve'ikevotecha lo noda'u. That's what I was looking for.
The Perush of what's his name?
Rabbi Avitur. Santas, right? Ibn Avitur. That's right. Rabbi Santas Ibn Avitur, the author of the Hosha'anot that we read on Sukkot. So he brings that pasuk. Ve'ikevotecha lo noda'u. So even though Hashem is there, so to speak, paving the road and stepping, so normally you would see footprints. It says, no, you don't see the footprints of Hashem. So it's not that the traces of Hashem are there, but there are dalalat, there are signs that he leaves behind. That, yes, the signs can be decoded. Just like if you read Borges' works, there are signs that he's there, right? So he brings here in the case of Dante, this dissimulation was accomplished by including himself as one of the figures of the Commedia. So that's one of the things that authors do sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, from the perspective of Hebrew monotheism, concepts such as Satan and evil must be understood rhetorically as a means of hiding divine omnipresence. Why do you have characters like Yamach Shemo Hitler? Why do you have the Satan messing things up? Because that's part of the dissimulation that God puts in the world. If there wasn't this Satan, then they would say, the world is so beautiful. How many people don't believe in God because of the Holocaust? Well, that's exactly the point. The point of the Holocaust and the point of the Satan and the point of Job suffering so much is exactly that, to hide the presence of God, because otherwise he wouldn't be a good writer.
But then somebody would ask, but still HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Hashgacha Peratit on us.
Right.
And if he has Hashgacha Peratit, then why is he doing all these terrible things? I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Right. I'm not trying to answer your question. So when he has Hashgacha Peratit, we acknowledge the fact that the book is very well written. And even though it's not well written, the author hides himself. Go ahead.
I'll explain my question.
Yeah.
The general common notion of Hashgacha Peratit is that Hashem has Hashgacha on each Perat.
Yes.
An individual divine providence.
Yes.
At the individual level.
Yes.
So while sometimes at the general level, I just answered my question. I was playing devil's advocate. But, they'll
But
ask.
explain to me the question, because I didn't catch it.
They'll ask, well, if you say that Hashem is disseminating himself by creating these terrible characters in creation, then where's Hashgacha Peratit? Isn't there Hashgacha Peratit? Why is he? What he could leave these terrible characters and decide not to have Hashgacha Peratit on all these poor individuals who are dying.
Where was Hashgacha Peratit for Iyov, for example?
Exactly, whereas Hashgacha Peratit for the Jews in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, and your answer?
I mean, the answer was in the question accidentally, that it's at the general level you see Satan, you see all these terrible things happening, but I would say at the individual level, each person has their own Hashgacha Peratit based on who they are and what they need in this world. It's not necessarily a perfect story. Nobody is a perfect story. Everybody has challenges and suffering.
Right.
But Hashem will give the suffering to he who the suffering will benefit and forge, or vice versa. He'll give the suffering to he who needs suffering because he deserves for whatever he's sinned.
Right.
Yeah, that's the individual answer, I believe.
Yeah.
Correct me
Right.
if I'm wrong.
Yeah. The Gemara says something terrible, Shelo Neda, but it says, for example, that many times Hashem will take away a young child because he realizes that the young child is a Sadiq now, but when he grows older, he's going to become Bar Minan and Rasha.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always, in back of the text, there's always a hidden text. We don't see the hidden text oftentimes, right? And that hidden text, that's where God is, right? So God is in the syntax. One Shteda explained to me, you don't see God in the text itself, but you can understand God. God leaves his signs in the syntax, which draw us together the different sentences and words. Hidden behind the syntax, there he is. So that's the syntax of the story. And we don't always see it. And there's always a syntax to the story. Nothing is as it seems on the superficial level.
Mm-hmm.
There was also a syntax for Iyov. There was a hidden text for Iyov.
And according to Harambam, Yov really was Hotel at the end of the day, I believe.
Right, or there was a benefit.
He was mistaken, in other words. Yov had a mistake, which he
The
needed.
joy that he attained by having the revelation of God made it all worth it in Iyov's mind. So if Iyov had to choose, Iyov was good with the choice, because it's the incredible no'am, the marvelous feeling of having God appear is so overwhelming that it just outweighed any of the suffering. And that wouldn't have happened but for the suffering. Okay. Go ahead, Chabad, read it. I will switch off, read the next
The
paragraph.
second chapter, right?
Yes.
The second chapter. So that was all the first chapter.
Right, that was writing in Friedi, and now we're going to go to semiology and metaphysics.
Okay, the second chapter examines the major differences between the metaphysical and semiological views of the universe.
Right, so the metaphysical view of the universe, if you're a scientist, you're interested in the metaphysical view of the universe, what is it? What is this table made out of? What is this material made out of? Why is this material held together? Right, so we want to know what is the object, right? And scientists try to go deeper and deeper into understanding what is it. So there's molecules, and the molecules are made out of atoms, and atoms are made out of electrons and protons and the neutrons. And then if you go even deeper, there's quarks, and then there's even smaller particles. So and then they get to a point where they don't understand. But nevertheless, that's what scientists are interested in. That's the metaphysical view of the world. There are things out there, and we want to understand what those things are. In contradistinction, you have the semiological view of the universe. The semiological view of the universe says that these things are not just things that exist for themselves, but these things are actually letters or symbols, and there's a writing here. So Chacham is less interested in what is this table made out of, or what is that plant made out of. He's more interested in reading the universe and understanding what are the messages that Hashem is trying to speak to us through his writings. It's a profound point, by the way, about the creations. Yes.
Interesting. In the Greek mind, the world is eternal.
Yes, and therefore things just exist. Since you're interested in what is it, so things just exist. So there is no reason for creation. Why would that be?
It hit me today. I always read this, but never ingrained that the eternality, positing that the world is eternal, is in a sense positing that Hashem and the world are disconnected, and therefore there's no need for divine providence. I've
Yes,
read it
of
many,
course.
I've read that famous thing many times, but suddenly today it actually
Yes.
hit me the way it works, because it's eternal. Because if it's eternal, it means there was no creator, and if there's no creator, it means that you don't need to. It doesn't.
Right.
The
Or to the
creator
extent that the creator is there, he's a part. He is coeval with the world, meaning he's a part of the world. There are stars, there are suns,
I would even.
and the sun, and there are gods or a god. But it's right. But there's nothing unique about that God. That God is part of the world. He's not outside the world.
Mm-hmm. It can have no goal. It can only be.
Exactly, because it's not a writing.
You're looking. I'll check the footnotes 1 second. I'll check.
Yeah, go ahead.
Check if there's anything. Okay. Okay. Just gonna check. Okay. It can only be, therefore, the physical phenomena cannot signify. Why can't they signify?
Because it wasn't written.
Because they are what is.
It wasn't written. There was nothing written there. Somebody takes a bunch of stones and throws it on the floor and says, "Oh, let me see what those stones mean." What do you mean? It wasn't placed in a particular order. Nobody wrote it. If some ink falls on the paper, would you try to read the ink? No. So things just exist. Why would you try to read it?
So I would say I would thus say that the implications of this are similar, if not identical, to the implications of the pantheistic view on the world, in which all that is all that is. In other words, the physical is all that is, and thus nothing signifies. So by saying that the world is eternal, we believe in Hashem, but the world is eternal.
Yeah.
You're basically saying that all that is nothing signifies anything. It
Right.
doesn't make a difference if Hashem exists
Or not.
or not.
Because he has nothing to say.
Very nihilistic view.
Right.
According to this perception, the most important thing is simply to be.
Existence.
In a general way, what is important for the Greek is neither to become nor own, neither to be able nor will. It is to be. And you only
Right.
live once.
Right. And the
Right?
and this, I'm sorry.
You only live once.
I'm not sure if that's
Famous,
related.
you only live once. Just to,
Well,
to
talking
hear.
about the famous is Shakespeare. To be or not to be, that is a question. Shakespeare's sentence, to be or not to be, that is a question, is absolutely correct. He summarized Greek thinking, ontological thinking perfectly. He really understood it. Right.
The semiological.
And by the way, this is why it's so, and this is a great satira. Maybe I'll just take a 1 minute digression to say the great satira for the scientists. The problem that the scientists have is that they actually can see the light of creation. It's called the cosmic radiation. They actually see the light of the Big Bang, and the light of the Big Bang fills up the universe. And they see that light, meaning the scientists today know as a fact that the world was created. And that creates a tremendous problem. So what they're saying, that's number one. The second thing that shows that the world is created is the fine-tuning of the world, which we've discussed on previous occasions. And the fine-tuning is simply mind-blowing. I mean, it is impossible to explain the world as a coincidence. So what do the scientists do? How do they deal with the fine-tuning of the world, and how do they deal with the light of creation, which they see as a cosmic radiation? So what they've been saying is that, we have an explanation. What if our universe is not the only universe? What if our universe is part of what they call a multiverse, where there are tons of universes being created? One universe has a moon. One universe has Pesua Daka. The other one is Kerut Shofcha. The other is Ozen is cut off. The other is nose is scratched. Right. Similar to the Library of Babel in Borges, one of the great stories that I've ever read, that there was every version of every book. You have the golden doves and silver dots, and you have the golden doves and copper dots, then you have the golden doves and silver dots, and you have every possible book. So that's the multiverse. The multiverse is the Library of Babel. And that's fine. You can believe in the multiverse, and that explains how there is no creator. You can do that, of course. But here's the thing. Science, by definition, deals with observable facts. So if you believe in the multiverse, that is actually a religious belief, because by definition, there is no observable fact that can substantiate or negate the existence of the multiverse. Now, if something is not negatable, therefore you can't substantiate it. And that's another principle of science. If it can't be negated, then it's not a theory. It has to be negatable. So they can believe in the multiverse. That makes them deeply religious. No less religious than we are. You understand? But science cannot disprove the Torah that says, Bereshit bara Elohim et ha'ashem et ha'aretz. All science can do is they can create another religion, created in the year 2020 or the year 2016, whenever it is they first created the multiverse. It's a new religion, not based on revelation. There is no, at least we have revelation. They have no basis for that religion, but it's a religion, and that's fine. So if somebody doesn't want to believe in God, the only way a person can decide not to believe in God is to be religious. That's the truth. Okay.
That's a nice one. The only one.
What?
Right. It's a nice.
Yeah, but it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
well put. Right,
How about-
atheism and theism are both.
Right, there is no
equally-
atheism, there is religion.
Atheism and theism are both equally religious.
Let me read the next paragraph. The semiological view of the universe conceives of physical phenomena and historical and personal events as significant indexes that are to be interpreted and decoded as speech and writing. Because once you say that God writes, so the question is, well, what does that word, what do those words mean? Therefore, the Hebrews reject the rigid nature history opposition, because in the Goyim you have nature, which is the world of the universe, and history, which is the work of man. We reject that. As with the book, there is a constant tension between the universe as God's ideality, the golden doves, and the actual creation, silver doves. That's fascinating. So the golden doves is the universe as it was, so to speak, in the thinking of God before He actually created the universe. And then you have the silver dots, which is the actual universe as we see it and as it is created. So the same way we read the words on the page, and those are the silver dots, where the minds of the author is the golden doves. Also, the universe in the mind of God is what He thought, and the universe as it was created is the silver dots. This tension is resolved in infinite variation. The initial act of creation is repeated in endless variations. המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. Divine providence is to creation what Derasha is to the book. Wow, that's beautiful. Divine providence is to creation what Derasha is to the book.
Structure of it.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. So you can actually make a derasha in your life. Avraham Avinu can make a derasha in his life, but the basis of derasha is hashgacha peratit, right? So the hashgacha peratit is the derasha on the book of God, right?
One of the implications of this view is the negation of the absolute autonomy of nature.
Yeah.
Man does not passively discover the truth.
Yeah.
Truth is the effect of dynamic interpretation. It is man's interaction with the world that determines the value and significance of the world.
Fascinating.
As with reading, sense and value is determined through man's active participation.
Right.
Through man's interaction, the world is transformed and becomes accessible to man. As with, I was gonna get into.
Yeah, but no, in quantum
mechanics?
but in quantum mechanics, it's absolutely true.
It substantiates this view a little bit more, but it's not necessarily 100%
Why?
equivalent to
No,
the
but
view, no?
quantum mechanics emphasizes the importance of
Right.
the observer.
Right. It substantiates that it's important.
Not even not just that it's important. The observer creates what he's seeing, in a sense, in quantum mechanics, and so this view of the world is quite well, let's say, substantiated by quantum mechanics. Yes.
This perception of man and the universe bears upon the nature artificiality.
Issue, right? What is better, natural things or artificial things?
Well, I mean, just before we get into what he says, in a sense, artificial things are all natural.
Yeah, but no. Yes and no. Artificial things are based on natural things, of course, but man takes it and improves it.
Right. I mean,
That's the point.
So that's what I mean. If the way certain scientists look at the world, the way these anti-God scientists look at the world, man is just another product of the evolutionary whatever of nature, and thus all that man creates is simple, evolutionary waste, which is worthless and this. And the way we view the world, Hashem created man la'asot, to create also.
Yes, also.
That which we do is not just another product of nature; it's a product of Hashem's desire that we produce, almost like He produces, in a way, right?
Okay, continue.
Okay, so the Rambam has reported a series of disputes between Bi'akiva and Turnus Rufus,
Tinius Rufus,
the Roman governor of Judea, concerning the validity of what may be described as the state of nature.
Right, because among the Goyim, especially among the pagans, but now among the left-wing environmentalist, the world is going to end because of man. That myth that man is destroying the world is actually a continuation of an old myth, because there's a tension between that which is natural, so there's nothing more beautiful than, for example, for some of these people to go on vacation in a place where they can just walk around completely naked, like the pigs in a farm, or like dogs in a street. It's the most beautiful, exhilarating experience, because it's a return to the natural state of man, right? So this is an old mythology, and the Romans, being pagans, they were obsessed with the beauty of nature unadulterated by man.
Because it's godly for them. Because for them, gods are the
because they have no gods, right? Because
their gods are the forces of nature. The Greek gods are all like these forces of nature gods, and thus, when you're connecting to that, it's the most divine thing that could be. And in fact, man is like the anti-god, because you're this disgusting. You're like a god, but you're not. And that's why you're gross. You're like undivine.
Yeah.
And to connect to the divine is to connect to the natural.
Right.
So it's all hafuch. With us, to connect to the divine is to, in a sense, so to speak, in a way, disconnect from that which is physical.
Right. Interesting. Okay, continue.
Reflecting pagan idealization of nature, Turnusrufus argued that many biblical commandments, such as rest on the Sabbath, charity, circumcision, run contrary to the acts of God, quote unquote, that is nature.
Right, exactly. So why do Berit Milah? You're destroying a beautiful body. Why rest on Shabbat? If you go to the garden on Shabbat, you see the ants are working, the bees are still making honey. So why are you resting? That's against nature.
I agree with him, by the way.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, it is. It's against nature.
Rabbi Akiva replied that the acts of man, that is artificiality, were superior, cleverly asking his opponent whether he did not prefer a baked cake over plain wheat. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So simple, by the way.
But it's always so pleasing to see the people complaining about global warming and carbon emissions are the ones who have the private jets flying across the ocean, inevitably creating the highest carbon footprints of any other individuals on the planet. Continue. But then they want to go into India and take away coal, making people literally freeze to death in the winter because they want to be able to take their private jets. Always lovely. Anyway, continuing. Sorry.
Through a process of transformation, nature becomes artificial, and thus accessible to man.
The same way, in order for you to read a book, you have to see the letters and put the letters together and put the words together, and then you create a text in your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a process. So there's a similar thing happens with nature. By finding the oil and using the oil in the ground as a means to transport myself across the world, or by finding the wheat seed and understanding this wheat can produce bread. That's reading the world. You've just decoded a secret. Imagine you're on Adam Rishon and you see these very spiky types of plants. Kos and dardar, that's the wheat. Just get it out of the garden. Like, it's annoying me. Like, get rid of it. How did he figure out that if you remove that spike and inside there's a shell, and if you take that shell and you take hundreds and thousands of those, not the shell, the little seed on the inside, the kernel, take hundreds of thousands of them and you turn it into flour. You take the flour and you put water and yeast and then it turns into bread. It's really incredible. That takes a lot of reading. So it really is remarkable. But that's reading the universe. So artificiality is the reading of God's work.
With Giambattista Vico, this posits that we can have true knowledge only of what we ourselves have instituted or created.
Right, verum fatum. Right, there's a full. It's not just verum fatum, the truth about, but there's a full Latin. There's another word there. It's give me a moment. What was the other word? There was verum fatum. Hold on a second, Mechila. This will take. Yes, verum fatum con ver tuntur, con ven tutur tuntur. The truth and what is made are convertible. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's the idea of Giambattista Vico regarding that. If you make something, then and only then do you understand it. But if you're observing something that you didn't make, you can try to connect with it somehow, but you'll never fully understand it. So all we can do is we can observe the world and try to read it, right? You can never enter the text. The author understands the text. He understands every character, every minute detail, and it's exactly why he placed it like that. The reader can interact with the text and create his own derashot on the text, but he can never get into the text like the author.
So would you say that the key word here is fully? Because
Fully,
you can understand many things, but just not fully because you weren't the creator of them.
Absolutely
You
correct.
don't understand fully that which you created, but you could still have an understanding.
Yeah, but even the understanding you have, you're understanding something about it.
No,
Right.
otherwise we're saying you just understand nothing and it's all nihilism. You know what I'm saying?
Right? No, we don't say that. Absolutely incorrect. I agree with you.
Just
You
wanna
understand something.
veer from that
But
Kitzoni
but
use.
it's no. I absolutely agree with you. There is no nihilism. We understand a lot about the world. We understand what molecules are. That's amazing. You know, we have these particle accelerators that help us understand even more. But the point is, whenever you understand something, you're understanding an aspect.
Right, the observation.
You never understand it fully. So you interact through the particle accelerator. You can interact with these subatomic particles, and you can see something about their behavior. But there's always a mystery. Shteda once explained to me that you go deeper and deeper, and every time you go deeper and deeper, then there's another sod. You weren't even aware of the other sod beforehand. So now you just disclosed the sod, you solved the riddle, but now there's a new riddle that appears.
It's a labyrinth that just keeps opening.
Exactly. So that's the Torah. So you never reach the end of the Torah, and you never reach the end of the universe. We'll never understand everything about the world, right?
Yeah. Right. Whoever reflects on this cannot but marvel that philosophers should have bent all their energies to the study of the world of nature, which since God made it, He alone knows, and that they should have neglected the study of the world of nations, of civil world, which since man had made it, men could come to know.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's at the general level.
Right.
It's a little. Can I ask a?
Yeah.
Can I
Well,
say
okay.
what's it
Answer your question, but first I want to explain what Vico just said here, which is a very
Okay,
interesting point. Vico here is saying that if you're a wise person, a philosopher, you should be interested in the humanities, because humanities is something that you can actually understand fully, since human beings are responsible for having created the humanities. But why put all the effort on understanding nature when you can't ever fully understand nature? That was Vico's argument, since God created nature.
So I think this goes back to the question of potential understanding versus actual understanding versus no understanding at all.
Okay.
Potential understanding means I may be able to understand such a thing because man created this, and I could also enter the shoes of this creator.
Right.
Doesn't mean I will understand it
Right.
because I haven't created it myself.
Right.
Then you have full understanding as if I created something myself. Then you have no understanding whatsoever, a very small understanding. That's observing something.
Okay.
What he's saying here, that men should engage in studying humanity. He's saying men should look at that which man created. But even if I look at something which man created, I won't really be able to fully know it because I'm not the creator of those things. It's like looking at a cake.
Well, yes.
It's like looking at a cake and dissecting it. I still won't know how to bake a cake.
Yes and no, because yes and no, because literature was created by man. So if you study literature and the people who wrote their works, like Borges discusses his works and he explains what he means here and what he means there, there's a dialogue with these creators, right? It's an ongoing dialogue, right? So the study of the humanities in the universities is something shesh b'zeh to'elet, if you consider complete knowledge to be the end game. So the point of Vico is well taken, as Francisco Sanchez himself points out. When we observe the universe, not only is it that we can never fully understand the universe because we didn't create it, verum fatum, but he says something really profound. He says, because we didn't create our minds, we don't fully understand our own thinking processes, and therefore we can't even understand how it is that we understand. That's how twisted the problem is. I'll give you an example. You say, oh, I see. All seeing, all eyes, they capture a particular electromagnetic radiation, and they perceive it as colors, different waves, different colors, different wavelengths absorb different colors. Is that the correct way to perceive the world? Let's say there was a blind creature. would he have a better perception? Is there another way that God can have a blind creature perceive the world even more than what we perceive it as colors and eyes with our eyes? Maybe in Olam Haba, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we're blind in Olam Haba, not at all. We actually see. We're blind in Olam Hazeh. It's here in this world we're blind. We just don't realize it. We don't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
We just see a very short wavelength. Suddenly you go to Olam Haba and the neshama observes without the physical eyes and it sees something in a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amok. That's very. I'm not reaching a conclusion. I didn't say the study of science is pasul chas v'shalom. We believe very strongly in Maaseh Bereshit. Maaseh Bereshit is science, not Maaseh Merkava. So of course there's a lot to learn from science, but the arrogance of scientists that they speak with such definitiveness, and we know now that there is no God. I mean, you don't know anything. You don't know the way your brain works, right? So you don't know now, right? You're religious. You're religious no less than I'm religious. At least I had revelation, and you didn't. But that's the point. It's really important to understand the thinking of Vico.
Mm-hmm. Right. We're at the end. Next paragraph, right?
Yeah.
Isaiah Berlin. Isaiah Berlin explains this fundamental concept as follows.
Yeah.
He was a big Viconian, I believe.
A Vishian thinker. I would say Vishian, I think is the
Vishian?
Yeah.
Okay. Men could know from the inside only what they had made themselves and nothing else.
Yes.
Again, he says it in a general sense. I guess the idea of Infata means that it's the potential for knowledge of man-made things is like the knowledge is way more important than the lack of potential. Meaning, the fact that I don't understand something which I didn't create myself doesn't mean I can't understand it.
Right.
The fact that I don't understand something which Hashem created doesn't mean I can't understand it.
You can only understand something about it.
Right.
You can understand something, and even that something is from a limited perspective. Correct.
The greater the man-made element in any object of knowledge, the more transparent to human vision it will be. The greater the ingredient of external nature, the more opaque and impenetrable to human understanding. There was an impassable gulf between the man-made and the natural, the constructed and the given. All provinces of knowledge could be classified along this scale of a relative intelligibility. Right.
Right. That's very interesting. So there is an impassable gulf between the man-made and the natural, of course. Right. There's that which we construct. There is that which was given to us. Right. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And therefore, so you can look at you can create a scale of things according to how well you can understand them. Right. And there's certain things in the universe we can't even interact with. Let's say dark matter. There's very little interaction between us and dark matter, unless maybe the scientists have devised something that I'm not aware of. But that's let's say on one end. Then there's quantum particles, and there's entanglement. There's different things, right? And then there's of course what I just wrote. I just wrote something that obviously I can understand fully because I wrote it, so I understand what I was doing there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Modern scientific thought further corroborates this point. The application of mathematics, an artificial system created by man, to the interpretation of physical phenomena indicates that nature cannot be adequately known unless it is transformed into a man-made system.
So think of that. We understand the universe through mathematics. Without mathematics, we can't understand the universe. I mean, the physical sciences, without the language of mathematics, they would not be able to express their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty amazing. So we're looking at the universe from a mathematical perspective. By the way, it's amazing that mathematics works. But okay, put that on the side. That in itself is a miracle. I mean, a wonder. But this is what you're understanding about the universe. You're understanding the mathematical aspect of the universe. Maybe there's another language that the Malachim speak. And when the Malachim use that other language, you understand a completely different aspect of the universe.
Mm-hmm. It just hit me people have such arrogance. They think they understand something, and they understand a lot of things. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that which you understand is only delineated by a man-made artificial world of
language, whether it's
tools,
words.
It's all these man-made tools.
Linguistics or mathematics or eyes. Or I'll give you an example. When I was sick with COVID-19, one of the remarkable things to me, I love smelling coffee in the morning. And what was amazing to me is that the smell of coffee was quite repugnant for close to a month. And then, thank God, my sense of smell fixed itself. When I had COVID-19, I was able to smell. I just smelled the coffee differently.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the question. Which sense of smell was the correct one? The correct one. Is there a correct way to smell?
Right.
There's an intended way. Hashem intended that we enjoy the world, and He gave us these senses so we can fully enjoy His beautiful bounty. I understand that. But that in itself is an illusion in a way, isn't it? Right? So I think this coffee smells amazing. Is smell a real character? It's a perception. And you say, oh, but it's a real perception. Oh, interesting. But is it a real perception? Or is it that you perceive something in a very specific way because you have the receptors, the smell receptors are designed very fine-tuned, and a slight deviation from that fine-tuning, and the smell receptors give you a completely different story.
Right.
That's remarkable. So what do we know about the world? We know about the world what our limited and very specific and very fine-tuned minds tell us about the world. We don't really know the world. The scientists think we understand. No, you don't. You observe, and there's something about the observation that is meaningful, and you transform that into human language, which is either linguistics or mathematics, and that's a wonderment in itself. I'm not discounting that, but the world is always hidden. That's why Ishteva used to say, Olam milashon ne'elam.
Mm-hmm.
The Olam, by definition, is hidden. So Vishian philosophy, or Vico, Francisco Sanchez, they were definitely onto a very deep concept that I think this is missing today in the Western world. That's why the Western world has reverted to paganism and the obsession with nature and how we're destroying the world, right?
Who speaks about this nice? Rasag in Aqdam Alayhim Al-Madbadi speaks about how knowledge is acquired by man. He gives the different, it's just through sensory perception, through Burhan, through your Sechel, but there's a limit to all of that. That's all limited to something, It's not infinite.
Yes.
And it really isn't infinite.
Yes. All right, let's continue.
Modern scientific thought. Sorry, I read that.
Yeah.
Right.
Commenting upon a verse in Habakkuk, and this is my article that I published about a year ago in the Journal of Rabbinics.
Right. Describing the laws of nature as halichot, olam, the ways of the world. The rabbis declared, al tikrei halichot, ela halachot. Do not read halichot, but halachot.
The laws of the world.
Laws, legal or precise formulations. At the ontological level, yani the mahuti level.
Yeah, ontological means what is the thing, right? That you know. So Greeks are obsessed with metaphysics, which is what is this thing? Ontological means how does that thing view itself?
Right. How does that thing alone isolate
its existence onto itself. Right. We don't believe in any ontological existence.
Because our existence is simply
because everything is
symptomatic opposition to other things.
Exactly, correct.
Right.
So at the ontological level, there are no natural laws, whether scientific or philosophical, that man could read. Right? There's nothing out there. All we have is perception. So the same way my smell, the way I smell things, there's a particular perception. But if you give me a different smell sensors, I would have smelled it differently. It's the same thing with the world. There is no real smell, right? Or what I see things. The eyes of a bee are shaped differently, and it perceives, I think, more ultraviolet light than we do. A bat sees perfectly. The only thing is it's blind, but it uses sonar to see, right? So these are different tools that different creatures have to sense sight. Similarly, what do we know about the world? That which we can know about the world through our particular tools. So there are no natural laws. There's no nature there, right, that man can read. Man's relation to nature is conditioned by a fundamental process of al-tikre, whereby the halichot are transformed to halachot. What a brilliant thing, I'm telling you. Every time I read this sentence, it's just so touching, it's so incredible. Because it's incredible. Right? You have nature, and it says al tikre halichot. Halichot is nature. And it says you can't read nature. All you can read are rules about nature, mathematical rules. You transform the nature because you can't access it, it's ne'elam, and you can make a rule E equals MC squared. You can do that. That's a halakha. So you can perceive the halakha, you can't perceive the actual mahut of the thing. This is an incredible explanation. It is simply mehila. Wow. Okay, so we see halachot. Okay.
This negates the possibility of mimesis or
I think it's
mimesis.
mimesis or imitation of nature.
Right. Mimesis or imitation of nature. At the literary level, too, nature must be artificially transformed in order to be meaningful. In this connection, it is worth, that's what you said, right?
Yeah.
It is worth noting that from the point of view of Semitics, what is peculiarly human in language is not the emission of vowels, as Rousseau maintained,
Right.
but the articulation of consonants.
Consonants.
Consonants, right?
Right.
Precisely those sounds which are not to be found in the state of nature.
Right, because in the state of nature, you have consonants, you have the birds that or the donkeys, and whatever, just making up these things. Whatever the sounds are, there's different consonants in nature. You have that all the time. But, I'm sorry, Mechila, different vowels in nature.
Okay.
What you don't have are the consonants, right?
Right. That's
And we're going to read that sentence again. Give me, right. This negates the possibility of mimesis or imitation of nature. At the literary level, too, nature must be artificially transformed in order to be meaningful. What he meant by that sentence is, if you're going to view the world not in the Greek way, in the metaphysical way, but you're going to view the world semiological, you still need to transform the world into semiology, into symbols, into things that you put together. In this connection, it is worth noting that from the point of view of Semitics, what is peculiarly human in language is not the emission of vowels, but the articulation of consonants. Okay, continue.
precisely those sounds are not to be found in the state of nature. It will be seen that unlike the Greeks who thought mainly in terms of natural space, simultaneous synthesis, the Hebrews thought principally in temporal terms, successive synthesis.
Okay.
This type of thinking involves the application of hierarchical and therefore artificial structures. Which type of thinking? Successive or simultaneous?
Successive.
Okay. According to the mystics, these artificial structures are the garments that will clothe the soul in the world to come. Reflecting this belief, Rabbi Moshe Albela, 15th to 16th centuries, declared, the pious constructs the time.
Yeah.
After discussing this point, he added, and this fits well with what was inculcated.
Inculcated.
What does that mean, Mahila?
Like to inculcate means like sometimes like you inculcate somebody with the medicine or with the vaccine.
Okay. I'll read it again.
Right.
And this fits well with what was inculcated in us by the mystic sages of blessed memory, that the days themselves lived by individuals are made into the garments of the soul in paradise.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to repeat later on in the next class,
Yes,
but I'm going to repeat the last 7 sentences or whatever that is. I think we studied enough.